Hey up, everyone. Welcome to Yorkshire Gamers, our Eat Big War Games podcast, and this episode 30. We've had a little bit of a break from the show. I hope you're all well out there. It's probably 6 weeks since I last did a recording, and over a month now since the last episode was aired. So I hope you're still all out there. Lots of people are still downloading the old episodes, which is great to see. And we'll look forward to some new content coming up. I shall give you a bit more of a rundown at the end of the show. But today we're going off about 9,000 miles, would you believe, south to a place called Perth in Australia. And we're going to be talking to Carlo Pagano. And Carlo he's a big wargamer. He's well known in a lot of circles, but he has brought together bits and pieces of paper and reconstituted Peter Gilders' old rules, Sands of Sudan, which used to be a regular favourite on the week-long trips to the Wargames Centre. And it would be like a drop-in game in between a couple of big Napoleonics or an ACW or similar. But we'll talk to Carlo later on about those rules and how they work. And our first kind of trip into Colonial Wargaming. But before we go there, unfortunately, I have got some genuine bad news for everyone to announce, and that's the passing of a chap called Dave Millwood. And if you don't know Dave, he was one half of English Computer War Games with Simon Norburn, and I've been in contact with Simon a while back about trying to get Dave onto the show. Hard Pounding was one of the computer war games that English Computer War Games developed, and it was quite seminal in my wargaming history after I moved on from Bruce Quarry Rules probably in my late teens, early 20s. We moved on to computer war games with Atari ST, if you remember those bad boys. We've still got one hanging around somewhere. And we had many years playing massive games with Hard Pounding. And there was a couple of other sets as well. I think there was a 7 Years' War set, an American Civil War set as well, which we dabbled with a bit here and there. But they were the mainstay of our computer rules for quite some time. And I met up with Dave and Simon at a number of shows, specifically at Triples, where they would always have a display game on each year, usually near the bar, knowing Dave, bless him. And sadly, he has passed away. I got the news from Simon a few weeks ago, so that's real sad news. I was hoping to, as I say, have him on the show, but that's not going to happen now. So thanks very much, Dave. Thanks for some fantastic War Games memories, and of course, thank you to Simon. You were part of those English Computer War Games programs. I've gone all professional with my recording equipment, and I've got myself a new microphone. It is a Marantz MPM 4000U, and you may notice a bit of up and down in levels and gain and all sorts of stuff over the next couple of episodes as I get used to this microphone. It is proper big boy's toy. It's a proper professional job as compared with the headsets and stuff I've been using in the past. So just bear with me while I get my head round what I'm doing with it. Well, that's enough chat for now. It's time to go and find all about the Sands of Sudan. So, without further ado, here's interview. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the interview section of the Yorkshire Gamer podcast. And it's been a while since we've been abroad, so today it's time to go up and away in the Yorkshire Airlines Pigeon all the way to the other side of the world. We last visited Australia in episode 11 when we spoke to Stephen Wold, the old wargamer in Adelaide, and it's about time that we got back down under. Regular listeners will have heard his name mentioned on the podcast before, and his blog, With Pyjamas Through the Deserts, has been a long-time go-to for those who like a little bit of camel on their table. Today's guest is the wargaming equivalent of Indiana Jones. Trawling through the wargames world like a 28mm Robert Langdon, looking for clues and old strips of antique paper, he's managed to rebuild and publish the classic set of Colonial Rules, originally used by Peter Gilder at the Wargames Holiday Centre. The title of the rules, Sands of Sudan, even sounds like a Hollywood blockbuster. You've got two guys, one from Australia and one in Yorkshire, so we apologise now if we end up talking about cricket. Today, however, he is the latest guest on the Yorkshire Gamer podcast. So let's give a big welcome to Carlo Pagano. How are you doing, Carlo?
Ken, very, very well, and thank you for such a colourful introduction. I'll try and live up to the hype.
Well, that's brilliant, mate. And we had a little chat before we started, and you've not done a podcast before, have you? This is your first one.
Absolutely, yeah, first podcast. Like a few of your guests, first time round.
Brilliant. We like having sort of bringing new voices to the airwaves for the hobby. So it's great to have you on board. But before you settle in, we always like to put our guests under a little bit of pressure before we start relaxing, and that's the 4-minute challenge. And for regular listeners will know that it's our method of getting the boring bit, the history bit, out of the way quickly, and then we can get on to some cracking jokes about stuff. So, have you had a bit of a practice, Carlo?
I haven't. No. I'm just relying on remembering the professionalism of people like Mark Freeth and how they managed to get through. So I'll try and channel the inner vibe.
Channel your inner Freethy. That's what we like to hear on this job. Okay, mate. I'll set the timer going, and after 3 minutes 30, you'll hear a little bit of music, which is a program called Countdown here in the UK. And if you go on too long, then Detective Regan from the Sweeney will tell you to shut it. So, are you ready to go, mate?
I'm ready.
Off you go.
Well, I guess like so many guests that you've had, the common thread for a lot of us has been ethics, and this is where you can cue the violins, mate. I was a sickly child, and I spent a little bit of time in hospital. And my mum, one particular day, brought me, besides the crossword puzzles and the anagrams and things like that, she brought me what was to prove to be one of the most fortuitous purchases ever, which was the 1974 Airfix catalogue, which I still have on my bookshelves. Yeah. And it opened a whole new world in terms of being able to look through. And, I close my eyes now and I can still see the beautiful artwork, the descriptions, and it really did. It was amazing, like any boy toy soldiers. So discovering that, of course, this English company also sold figures here in Australia. It was almost like a weekly visit off to the news agency in those days.
Yeah.
To grab a box. I think my first box was a box of the Roman army or Roman soldiers, and I grabbed it because it had the most pieces. Little did I know, of course, that half of them were shields. But there you go. You grab it because you think you're going to get more bang for your buck. And that was it. And we started with that. Started collecting Napoleonics, which has always been my first love, Napoleonics, and still probably remains to be. Fast forward to year 8, high school, sitting next to all the new boys in science, and a particular chap I've sat next to has some fantastic drawings of orcs and Nazgul and warriors, and I say, look, I know all that, and he says, well, I know what you've drawn as well, nowhere near as good as he is, and that was my lifelong friend Paul Young, and he ended up being my first wargaming mate. But Ken, we were clueless. We were absolutely clueless. We raided the library shelves, 793.9, I think, on the Dewey Decimal System.
We've not had that before.
At the public library, and we looked at all these books. But Bruce Quarry was the first one we went to, the Orange Airfix Guide, Napoleonic Wargaming. He suggested that you mount your troops on beer coasters. This shows you how clueless we were. We didn't realise that you had to glue them. And which made assaults uphill quite challenging. It was very challenging. So eventually, a newspaper came along. One day, the Sunday Supplement had a feature on a wargaming club in South Perth called the Colonial Wargaming Society. I managed to nag my parents to drop me off at Paul's place, and then Paul's mum drove us down there to South Perth, and it was like opening the door to Aladdin's cave. It was fantastic. All these guys pushing around toy soldiers, miniature figurines, up on the stage. There was the club troops back in those days. The club had troops, and we fell in love with wargaming ever since. A lot of expat Brits, a lot of locals who were really good. They mentored us through, and I guess that's what I've been doing ever since. It's been a lifelong journey, and Paul and I still catch up for a war game, and I'm very fortunate to have fallen into this hobby. Very fortunate, and I guess everything that's happened since and everything that will go forward is a result of that, Ken. And I think we're getting pretty close to 4 minutes now.
Yeah, we can hear the music coming up.
Just as well.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for that, mate. That's a great introduction, and very similar to my own. And I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast are of a similar generation. All people are welcome. I'm not holding anyone, unless you're from Lancashire, of course. And
Of course.
there's a bit of trouble then. So, that club that you mentioned there, is that the one that you still go to, or
Absolutely. Absolutely, Ken. So I joined that club, junior member, no voting rights, back in 1981. So we were 14 at the time, and I'm a little bit past 14 now, getting towards my 56th year. And yes, I'm still a member at that wargaming club. We game every Wednesday night, and Paul's down at another fine wargaming club south of the river. We're fairly fortunate in Perth. We have a fair few good wargaming clubs, but a lot of those guys that still, I guess, really showed me the ropes in those early days and were incredibly generous. And I think that's an overriding theme through my wargaming experience, is that wargamers the world over have an amazing generosity in terms of knowledge, figures, their tactics, tips. We're very fortunate.
Just give us a rundown of the club then. How big is it? Where do you meet?
Sure.
What sort of stuff have you got going on?
So we meet every Wednesday night at the North Perth Bowling Club, which has a full bar, which is fantastic. Straight away,
excellent.
It's so far ahead. We have about 48 members, of which on any particular night we'll have 24, 25, and then we have a gaming day every Saturday. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
Brilliant.
A Saturday every month at the bowling club. We tend to, obviously, we've been there quite some time. We're a bit of a novelty to the bowlers who visit the club, and the great thing about it doesn't matter if you're 14 or if you're 90. Men like toy soldiers, and they'll come up and they'll ask questions, and they'll be really fascinated with what's going on. And I think their wives come up and maybe try and suggest that they should take up the hobby so they spend a little bit less time at home, but that would be cruel.
It would. So just for everyone, just to clarify, is that like lawn green bowling? It's not like Merv Hughes fast bowling.
That's right. It's lawn green bowling. Even though Merv was lawn green bowling, it would have a very aggressive, gladiatorial element to it. But no, it's lawn bowling.
Is it flat green or is it crown green? We've diverging already here. But are you aware of? Do you have crown green bowling in Australia, or is it all flat?
Well, I've only ever seen flat. Okay, but in terms of just flat, where they toss the jack out and then off they go, like the Commonwealth Games and things like that.
Yeah.
I've never seen crown bowling. What is that? Something that's particularly north of England type.
It is a north of England thing, and basically instead of having a flat green, the centre of the green is raised up, so you've got different angles, and you have to go up a rise and then down the other side. So it's a kind of a different skill.
Now I'm going to have to Google this after I get off this, because I've never seen anything like that. It's a very flat country, Australia, Ken. Very flat. have to take advantage of the geography that God's given us.
Yeah, I'm sure you can find a bit. It's only 2 or 3 inches, I think, in the middle. You just need a bit of dirt under the
That
middle. That's all.
that's a mountain range for us. At least in Western Australia. On the East Coast, a little bit different.
Yeah. You mentioned another club in the area. Then, what sort of size city is Perth?
So Perth's population is probably 2 million. So
Oh, right, it's quite big.
it's a big city. It's one of the most I guess spread out cities in the world in terms of the urban spread.
Mm,
I should have some quip of what it actually is, but it's enormous. It's one of the most spread cities in the world.
yeah.
Obviously, Perth being has probably our summers are a bit hotter version of what you guys have just been experiencing in the UK.
Yeah.
So it can
Yeah.
be very, very warm in Western Australia during the summer. And I think in the last few years, it's virtually 6 month summers. Come March and February and March, etc. Weeks of 40 degrees plus are not uncommon. But we're all kitted out for it. We're all geared up for aircon and verandas and fans. I mean, we felt incredibly sorry for everyone in Europe in the past month, just with watching people just struggling with in houses that aren't designed for that kind of heat. So, but yeah, it's a big city, a big population. There's a lot of wargaming clubs, like a lot of areas. I'm sure in your particular towns, members from clubs go off and form new clubs, and that's exactly what's happened with quite a few of them. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's spreading the hobby everywhere it can, and yeah, the PMGG is a very good club. 60-40, they game in probably a bit more fantasy than we do. We're mainly an historical club, but we're open to all kinds of gaming.
I had a little bit of a look on the map before we started, where you are and where Stephen Wold is, my previous Australian guest in Adelaide, and it's about 1,700 miles. I didn't
Absolutely.
realise. Oh, that's the same distance as it is from my house to the North Pole, which is just astounding.
But
So
Tim, that
is it?
presents challenges. That presents
Yeah,
challenges. It really
yeah,
does in terms of war game shows and the distance. And so the club environment becomes incredibly important for not only new members but existing members, because where, and this is the thing that we always, I'm most jealous about. I'd love to spend a few years just living in the UK to go to every single wargaming show I possibly could in a car that I could get
yeah,
to and then get home that same night or the very next day. I mean, I've been fortunate to attend Sheffield Triples a couple of times, and that was a great show. I enjoyed that at the university. That was met
yeah,
a lot of fantastic guys. But for us, it's not only a major undertaking. If we want to go to the National Convention in Canberra, and really that is the biggest one,
yeah.
you're looking at $1,500-$1,600, or what's that, £800 or £900 in airfares just to get there, let alone accommodation, and then of course everything that we have to spend, because you can't go there and not spend.
Exactly. So does that geography tend to regionalise the wargaming? Do you have it? Do you have a war game show in Perth, for example? Because, like you say, if you want to go anywhere else in the country, it's a major financial implication.
Unfortunately, it does. What it does
Mm,
do is that, particularly for West Australians, now, if you're in Sydney or Melbourne or even Brisbane,
mm,
Canberra, it is easier. I mean, a Melbourne drive to Canberra is 7 hours, so that's pretty achievable. Sydney to Canberra, 3 hours. I mean, the flights up and down the coast there, it's the cream run for the airfares for the airline,
mm,
so you can do $100 or this, that, and the other. But so you find that there is a fair bit of interaction between the East Coast wargamers. We don't have a major wargaming show in Western Australia. There's been a number of different attempts to try and get things going, but to try and get retailers and vendors, etc., to come over that way. Certainly, when we tried to do it, there were certainly less wargamers about at the time. It's a major undertaking, and I remember Nick Robson, when he first came over to Australia, he flew over to Perth in '91, I think. Nick Robson from Eureka Miniatures, and of course there just wasn't the economy of scale in terms of the numbers through the door to make it worth his while. But he does very well on the East Coast shows, and he's a doyen. He's a major fillip for the entire industry. So that makes it hard. But people who do travel over, there are national competitions. I tend to avoid competitions myself.
Yeah.
But there are national comps and things like that go on. And we have a number of members that go over. And in fact, one of our members is a national champion in an ancient rule system called, is it Meg?
Yes, Meg.
Yes.
We've had the author Simon Hall. He's been on the show a couple of times. So yes,
yeah, he actually visited our club when he was in Perth for business. So he's nice chap. But so we've got the national champion, or at least he's been the national champion. He might have been the runner-up next time, but he's a very, very astute ancient wargamer. So they do fly over, but it's a challenge. It's a tyranny of distance.
Yeah. So when you go to the shows, then are you going as a visitor, or are you putting on display games? Have you ever been involved in that scene?
In the early stages of CanCon, mainly going over in the early days to compete, and then to do that for a brief period of time. And then I haven't been back to Canberra for quite a few years. Every time I try and get something organised, something else happens, family-wise or expense-wise, which warrants more than the $2,000 to get over to Canberra and actually stay in a hotel.
So most of your gaming then will happen at the club. Do you have a setup at home as well, or is it mostly club stuff?
No, I do. I'm very fortunate. I have a Wargames Room which I'm actually in at the moment, which allows me to leave games set up for quite some time. It's a permanent 12x6, so a 12 foot by 6 foot table, which breaks down to a 6x4 and a 8x6. So if I wanted to have a smaller game, and they're all on caster wheels, so I can move them about if I have to, which I don't tend to, but the option's there at least, and the ability. Eventually, the plan for that was to be able to spread the tables and then be able to put a sleeve in the middle and go to 15x6 if I possibly could. But yeah, I do that, and I'm fortunate. I've got my books here. I'm at my painting desk now. I've got cabinets there of figures, which I'll show you afterwards, and it's a good place to come up and just lose yourself in the hobby.
Excellent. And did you do the tables yourself, or did you, as we say over here, did you get a man in?
No, I got a man in, and I'm very fortunate to get a man in. I've got my good friend Steve Yardley from Hull. From Hull. He's a wargamer at the club, a big wargamer at the club, and he's a fantastic cabinet maker, and he's an artisan, is what I call him. And so he built everything. He built the tables, the cabinets. He built our kitchen downstairs. He's a superstar. And he's a canny Yorkshireman. He's a good man.
Oh, brilliant! Absolutely brilliant. Well, my table here just happens that it's the same size, 12x6, but it's home built. If you look underneath, it looks like the wing of a World War One plane. There's all bracing and struts and everything everywhere. It's a bit of a Heath Robinson invention, to be fair, but it stayed up for this long. It's not fallen over yet.
Well, I mean that's the challenge, isn't it? To make sure it stays upright, especially under the weight of not only figures but wargamers. And as we know, we do tend to get a little bit heavier as we get a little bit older. But
exactly. Yeah, there's definitely a no leaning on the table rule here. We have to every now and again you'll forget, and you have to nudge somebody and say, "Stop leaning on the table. Stop leaning on the table." We're going to talk in some detail later on the show about colonial wargaming and the Sudan. But you've mentioned Napoleonics, and you've got a separate blog, haven't you?
Whiff of grape shot.
Whiff of grape shot.
With pajamas through a whiff of grape shot.
So just tell me about your love for Napoleonics then. Where did that come from? How are you into that at the moment?
Well, I think if you want to go back, I think it gets back to that FX catalogue. It was I mean, you remember the artwork, Ken, and
Oh gosh, yeah.
you've got a British redcoat there preparing to receive a French cuirassier charge, and you've got Imperial Guardsmen going through a built-up area. It's just Highlanders there with smoke and everything swirling and the banners going. The color is
Yeah.
so alluring, and so for me, once I started doing my research and grabbing these books, and of course the Bruce Quarry Wargaming, Charles Grant's Napoleonic Wargaming, um, you just saw these pictures. But the thing that the real clincher was seeing these magnificent arrays of figures from Peter Gilder at the Wargames Holiday Centre in Wargames Illustrated and miniature wargames initially, actually even going back further, Battle for Wargamers. I still remember Mum bringing me some Battle for Wargamer books, magazines from the local shop, and they were just superb. I mean, the Hyboria campaigns and tabletop teasers, and it was just, what more would a young man want than to be able to read about deeds, Look and Learn magazine.
That was brilliant.
And the artwork was superb. And so Napoleonics captured me with the colour, and it still does. It really still does. And I think whenever you see an array of war games put on, it's the Napoleonics that tend to draw you initially. And then, of course, there's so many other rules. I mean, your Italian Wars is incredibly colourful, and I want to talk to you about that a little bit later on. But also 7 Years' War and Ancients, etc. But there's nothing like Napoleonics.
Yeah. So do you have big collections of Napoleonics? What scale?
I do. Like many foolish people, I have them in several scales. The vast majority is in 28mm. Vast majority is metal, with a few plastics of the new array of plastics, which are absolutely superb. But the vast majority are metal. A wide array of collections. I'm a massive fan of Elite Miniatures.
Who isn't?
And I think Peter Morby does a superb job. And I'm anal enough to not want to fight 1805 games with 1815 troops. So I have a whole series of troops specifically for 1805, 1807, Russians, Austrians, and French, bicorns, different shakos for the Russians, the Austrians in helmets primarily. It's really quite sad.
Pete Morby's been a guest on the show. He was in one of episode 8 or 9. He was on one of the early ones. And the thing I like about the connoisseur figures is that although when compared to a modern day figure, they don't have as much detail, what they do have is a massive amount of character. And when they're built up in a big unit, they just almost come to life with the way that they look.
Never a true word spoken, Ken. I mean, I've got quite a few connoisseur as well, and you look at it, you put a 36-man battalion out there, and it's the animation is incredible. And I think his 1805, 1807 range, particularly the French, is one of the best ranges that's ever been sculpted. So you have so many variations. For anybody who has an interest in that particular period whatsoever, do yourself the proverbial favour. Go off and find someone who, have a look at his website, but find someone who has a collection of those figures, because you can put a battalion together with almost 14 or 15 variants, and that's incredible. I think he does a tremendous job, Peter.
Yeah, and if you're listening, Peter, where's your Franco-Prussian figures? You had them on side working on them when I come to see you nearly 2 years ago, mate.
If you're listening, Peter, where's my cavalry trumpeters? Let's have some trumpeters, please. Not everybody has the sculpting skills of a Doug Mason or a Dave Doherty. Okay, there are some blokes like me that struggle with glue and paper. So some trumpeters would be nice, please, and standard bearers.
Excellent. Well, I do like to use this podcast to get my own personal requests for figures into manufacturers. So well done for jumping on that, Carlo, and hopefully Pete will get his finger out and get some stuff done.
That's right. I think he's got trumpeters, actually. Standard bearers is what I need.
Standard bearers. Come on,
Mounted
Pete.
standard bearers. There we go.
Other than Napoleonics, anything else that you go?
Yes, absolutely. Certainly ancients. Big fan. Another one of your guests, Simon Miller. Massive fan of his To the Strongest set of rules. It's outstanding. It's innovative. It reminds me when I was first wargaming, I had no idea what I was doing. I moved figures on a grid. Little did I know that there were millions of pounds to be made if you're a sharp entrepreneur based in England, putting together a grid-based ancient wargaming system. So well done, Simon. We love Simon's rules at the club. We have 8 active members who constantly play To the Strongest. The whole system is sensational. It's fudge proof, so there's no arguments of that. No tape measure, no dice. It's sensational, and it's really well supported. He's done a fantastic job with that. So certainly ancients. I do like some 7 Years' War. I do dabble in a bit of World War II with Chain of Command, but I haven't played that for quite some time. But at the moment, I'm trying to really focus on Napoleonics, and of course, I do love my my Sudan, my colonial game. That's a big love as well. But at the moment, the Napoleonics just seems to be a bit more of a focus.
Fantastic. You mentioned earlier on coming across to triples a couple of times. So you've been to the UK. Where did you come over? What did you? Was it business or pleasure or a mix of both?
The first time I came to the UK was pleasure. I was with my fiance at the time, well, girlfriend at the time, now my wife. In fact, it was one of those interesting stories, Ken, if you can indulge me. When I first met her, about I think 3 dates in, I'll pull over and I say, Fiona, I've just got to tell you something, and this is, it's a pretty big deal to me, and really it's important for us to go forward. You need to know this. And so she's there, and she's expecting me to say I've been married before, or I've got children, et cetera, et cetera. And I pull out my wargaming box out the back and say, I'm a wargamer. So I thought, if she doesn't like this, there's no point going on a 4th date. This is going nowhere. She was relieved that I wasn't obviously just out of prison.
Serial killer.
Exactly right. So after that, it was fine. So the first time to the UK was pleasure, and then the other times were business from a job that I was doing. Remember newspapers, Ken? I was one of our newspaper experts for our company, so International Newspaper Division. So it took me all over the world, and the UK was always my favourite. So I had the chance to visit triples. I certainly had the chance to visit the Wargames Holiday Centre.
Brilliant.
When Jerry and Mike were still running it, and met some fantastic guys there. I was lucky to meet Herbert and John Bramley, Chris Cornwall, Duncan. I think Duncan Forrest was there too, who's a big in the Grand Manor gamer and has a massive collection. So it was a good chance to meet them, but it was a good chance, more importantly, to go down to Nottingham, actually, have a couple of drinks with the Perrys at their pub there. The Old Jerusalem. In fact, I got all my Brunswickers, my Perry Brunswickers, directly off Alan and Michael there. It was a great experience.
So in other pubs throughout the country, drugs are being pushed under the table, but in Nottingham, it's metal. It's 28mm Brunswickers.
It's just as heavy, Ken, but it's but it actually keeps people off the streets. It's fantastic.
It does.
And I tell you what I did do. I learned that if you're going to go through customs, pick the customs lane that you go through. Don't go anywhere where the ladies are. They just won't understand. Go where the blokes are. Okay? The guys will ask you to open it up. What's that? They'll be fascinated. They'll wave you on. On you go, son. Yeah. I love that.
Fantastic. So we always draw the first part of the podcast to a close with a thing called the Venn diagram of wargamers, and it's just a little sort of snapshot of where you sit in a very wide and varied hobby. As my friend Sean Clark from God's Own Scale always says, wargaming is a broad church. So I split it down into wargamer, painter, collector, and historian. So where do you see yourself in that little setup?
It's a brilliant question. I would imagine I would be dead set in the centre, but if I had a
Yeah.
leaning more towards wargaming, but
Mm.
I've had the opportunity to expand on the other three, to have a nice collection in order to wargame, to research in order to wargame, to paint and commission to
Yeah.
wargame. And
Mm.
so I'll be dead smack in the middle, but everything I do for wargaming.
Yeah. And do you paint stuff yourself then?
I still do. Absolutely, I do.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate in quite a few years ago that I had the ability to be able to get commission some figures, and I still do commission particular regiments. At the moment, I've got a very good painter. Once again, a member of our club who I'd rate as one of the finest painters that I've ever come across. He's painting up some Calpe Prussians for me because it's one glaring gap. Yeah, they are. And once again, I was very fortunate to meet Peter Fitzgerald, very generous man, Peter Fitzgerald, and very, very talented, very clever man. And so there's a gap in my collection with 18, 13, 18, 15 Prussians. And that's what I need. I have a stack of 1806 Prussians from the elite range, but they're not going to quite cut it on the fields of Waterloo.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant, brilliant. So do you enjoy the history side of it? Do you like to get everything historically correct for your
Very
games?
much so. Yeah, very much
Yeah.
so. Very much so. So, a prime example is To the Strongest. I think one of the reasons that we love To the Strongest so much, we don't play competitions. We don't play unhistorical games. So, you haven't got, Polybian Romans fighting against 100 Years' War English. It's Polybian Romans versus Carthaginians, and
that's always been a concept of wargaming. I'm not knocking it. I just don't understand it. Where you have armies that are in some cases a couple of thousand years apart in terms of actual being on the planet, fighting against each other, and
I just don't understand how it works. I don't understand how it works because what chance does that poor old Numidian skirmisher have against that armor wielding madman from from Basingstoke? There's another one from Basingstoke with a two-handed sword. He hasn't got a hell of a lot of chance. But having said that, I'm like you. All power to them. If that's the game that people want to play, you know what? Fantastic. I'll come up. I'll have a look. I'll enjoy your figures. I'll see you laugh, and I'll really walk away from your table saying those boys are having a lot of fun. It's just not for me.
So, are you on social media? I've seen you on Facebook. But do you do anything else like Twitter or Instagram or all the YouTube or all the other ones?
Yes, not yet. Even though I admire all those people who put such fantastic content up, and Fraser is a prime example. The old VK.
VK,
I love seeing what Fraser puts up, and there's another chap, JP, who puts up some wonderful games of General to Army with his lovely collection. He has his son there as well, and I like that a lot. I enjoy. I tell you what, if I had the ability to put together something like Little Wars TV do, the Americans over there, I mean, they've taken that level of YouTube channel to an absolute new level. It's what they do is sensational. At the moment, they're in a Pyrrhic campaign, which I'm waiting for it to drop. It's almost like Game of Thrones in the early days. When's this dropping? Episode 4. Anytime you can get people like me interested in something like that, you're doing a great job. They do a great job. And then, of course, Facebook. I love the fact on Facebook that people ask questions, that they share their pictures of their collections. And you know what? The best part of it, once again, is the wargaming community. They just tend to. There's not a lot of knockers anymore, Ken. There's not a lot of people who have, why would you put that up? That's this. You know what? There's just encouragement, advice, enthusiasm, patience. It's that part of what social media has done. Forget all the other rubbish that goes on. That part, if you're in a hobby and you have like-minded people, who we've all got something in common, Ken. We love playing war games with miniature figurines. Okay, so straight away we've got so much in common. So we want to be able to encourage people and the next generation. And you see these new younger people playing. They're not just playing Warhammer. They're not just playing Blood Bowl or anything else. They're pushing figures around. They're away from a screen. They're not playing PS5 and all these other games. They're actually socialising and they're painting and they're actually producing some really outstanding work. Which I'll tell you what, the best ideas, like always, I steal.
Of course. Well, I'll definitely give a good shout out to Little Wars TV and the fact that they awarded me with the best podcast last year does not influence that recommendation whatsoever.
Of course not.
Of course not. No.
Your integrity is never in question.
Yeah. I get disappointed about free stuff actually doing this. I thought I'd be pouring in through the letterbox, but sadly it isn't. No, the lovely lads on Little Wars TV. Unfortunately, we had a game arranged between myself. I do like a side podcast called Brews in the Binyard with Alex Sutherland from Storm and Steel and Sean Clark from God's Own Scale, and we had a kind of us versus them war game match set up for when they were over, but unfortunately Sean was ill, so we had to cancel. But that would have been amazing.
It would have been good fun. It would be like it would have been the Ryder Cup of wargaming.
Oh yeah. Well, I had some Yorkshire tea in a metal cage with a padlock on, as like to give to them so that they couldn't throw it in the sea.
Very good. Very good.
So there was loads of stuff that we would have done, but unfortunately it didn't come off. That's a real shame. A real shame. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's been a great introduction, and what we're going to do is going to take a very short break, and then we'll come back with our usual second part of the show where we talk about big games. Well, traditionally, the second part of the show is always about big games, and it's always interesting to chat to my guests and listen to their experience of big games. It could be the same as mine; it could be completely different. Just to get some points of view from different ages and different places around the world. So, the first question I ask everyone, Carlo, is: what does a big game mean to you?
Oh, a big game means everything to me. It's something to plan for. You look forward to. You muster up new troops. You get things organised. I'm one of those guys. I have a spreadsheet. If there's a big game,
but a spreadsheet.
So if a big game with tasks to do, and a classic example, I think, was our 2015. I guess everywhere around the world we're doing bicentennial anniversaries for the Battle of Waterloo, and as being the Napoleonic Wargaming Society in Western Australia, and I think I was president at the time, I felt an obligation that we had to put on a good show.
Yeah.
And so I had this pages of spreadsheets. Went on the local radio station, the national, statewide on the ABC, which is I guess the BBC equivalent of, promoting war games on breakfast radio, and it was wonderful. It's wonderfully successful. But without my spreadsheet, I would have been lost. So a big war game to me is just what it's all about. If you can command a corps, and then you're facing 5 corps, and there's the reserve corps commander there, and what more do you want? It's fantastic.
Oh, exactly. You're preaching to the converted here, most definitely. And you mentioned earlier on that you managed to get to the War Games Holiday Centre. So how long ago would that have been?
Oh gosh, long enough that they're not digital photos, put it that way. I had to take the photos off and get them developed. Those panorama photos. I've got masses of these panorama photos. It was the Battle of Austerlitz. And I turned up, where was I? I'd been in Leeds, and then I was off to Preston North End, if I get that wrong, and then off to Scarborough. That was a journey in itself, and it was wonderful. I mean, it was like literally going to Nirvana. It was that that you've been there, Ken. So you walk in and those shelves of wargaming figures and the tables are laid out, and people are getting their plans ready, and on the Friday night, and you're preparing for war. Yeah, it was just fantastic. I was on the Allied side.
Yeah.
I commanded. I'm trying to think. I can't remember. I'm sure I've made notes somewhere on a spreadsheet, probably, of the command that I had. But it was a fantastic experience, and it was my first time playing in the Grand Manor,
Yeah.
and it was everything I wanted. I loved in the Grand Manor, and having Jerry and Mike there, and wonderful, wonderful people to host such a wonderful destination, and it was the weekend of a lifetime. I had such a wonderful time, and it was only unfortunately, once again, it's the distance. If I had a choice, I would have been there like Dave Doherty every month.
Yeah. And how would you organise that before you came over? Has
I
it been?
did.
Was it part of your holiday plan?
No, it was did. I mean, back in those days, I think things were a little bit different from a corporate perspective. And my managing director and I had a wonderful relationship. And he said, "Look, just make sure you take 2 or 3 days of your 2.5 weeks away for yourself. We'll take
Yeah.
care of the hotel or whatever it was." And that's what happened. And I ended up going up to Scarborough, and I took care of the wargaming part of it, and it was fantastic. It was brilliant. And Chris Cornwall was good enough to drive me back to my hotel in London at the
Oh,
time,
right.
and
Yeah.
after it, and had a chance to talk to him. Chris would tell you that I forgot my jacket, and an hour into the trip, he had to go back and get it. But we don't talk about that. And and once again, you just met some people that are really they're icons in the industry. They were in the hobby, I should say, not the industry, and it was a great experience. But fighting ocelots and the Pratson and those beautiful figures, and figures that you just recognise from the pages of War Games Illustrated. It was
Yeah.
superb. The command stands that had featured on covers are there. You
Yeah.
can touch them, and Mike
Yeah.
and Jerry were very generous from that perspective as well.
Oh, fantastic! It's definitely an experience. I remember, and I've mentioned this before, but I remember I used to do some painting for them. I remember the first time I turned up with a tray with 4 36-man battalions of French on, thinking, "Wow, that is a load." And then sorted the business side out with Jerry, and he just slid them onto a tray and they just disappeared into this mass of figures. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe how much stuff they've got.
Just incredible. And you see what Mark's done now, also down in
Yeah,
well, he was in Basingstoke. He's in the hotel. Is the hotel still in Basingstoke? That he's
it is. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was lucky enough to go down last year. So yeah, it's in a hotel in
It
Basingstoke.
just looks superb. I mean, there's another chap who does social media really, really well. Anytime Mark Freeth drops a video, I'm probably viewer number 3, which means I
Yeah.
really need to pay more attention at work. But that's that's another problem.
Yeah, don't tell him, but he's a lovely lad, Mark. He really is.
He is. He's been very good to me. He's a lovely chap.
Yeah, he's been on the show a couple of times, and it was great fun meeting up with him last year when I went down for the Don Featherstone weekend. So a big shout out for Mark and the War Games Holiday Centre, as always. Is there anything, or has there ever been anything like that in Australia?
No, a lot of people spoke about it. I've got a friend of mine at the moment, Matt, who actually has a B&B in Normandy.
Oh, Matt Williamson, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Matt
yeah, I know
Williamson,
Matt. Yep, yep,
the old
yep.
the Blue Willow, as we call him. He's a wonderful bloke,
That's
Matty.
it.
Well,
Yeah.
Matty and I have wargamed a bit at my place when I was living in Sydney, and Matt had plans to have something in the Southern Highlands, which would have been an
Mm,
ideal spot. Very similar, in fact, in terms of greenery and hilly. It would have been a beautiful,
mm.
picturesque. But he's decided to do it over in France because he's a selfish bastard. So um,
Yeah, he's got like a chateau or something, hasn't
he
he?
has
I've seen some
absolutely,
pictures of it. Yeah, I've
absolutely.
seen
And
some
he's
pictures of it.
and he's always working hard. So no, we haven't. But geez, there's been a lot of talk about it
Yeah, it's
about
it's
having
like
one.
it. are you lucky? You know, we think we both think we're lucky with our 12'6" war games tables and our figures there. We haven't got a chateau in France, mate. We're
No,
not that lucky at all, really,
no,
are we?
no, not at all. Not at all. I mean, and he lives the life of Riley. Let me give you the tip. He
Yeah,
he's having a good old time. But you see, you talk about the War Games Holiday Centre, and then you've got, of course, you've got Andy and uh, is it Richard who's got legendary
Richard.
war
Yeah,
games. I
yeah,
mean, you look at what they do. I mean, it's superb, absolutely
yeah,
superb. Um,
yeah.
and you think to yourself, yeah, oh, wouldn't it be nice to be located somewhere around that vicinity to be able to once a month just dart off for a weekend would be sensational.
Yeah. Well, I'm lucky enough to have known Richard for over 30 years. He's a member of the same club as me. So, yeah, apart from him being a Leeds United fan, he's a good lad. He's a good lad.
Well, once again, the legendary war games have been similar to the Holiday Centre, have been huge supporters of the Sands of Sudan. They've
yeah.
been fantastic for that.
Hmm. So, your big games then, you do stuff down at the club. You said you have a Saturday free. Is that kind of
We do.
a space for you to break out and do something bigger than normal?
Certainly. Or alternatively, I do put some bigger games on here. I mean, I still
Mm,
recall when I was at the War Games Club as a university student, we would put on, we would war game, we would have our own War Games holiday centre. Would war game, would all turn up on the Friday morning, and we played Empire 3 at that time. I don't know if you're familiar with Empire Napoleonic
yeah,
Wars.
yeah, I am.
Okay,
Yeah.
and we all had vast collections. And so 10 or
Mm,
12 of us would turn up, would set up on a 30-foot by 6-foot table. There'd be like 10 cores aside. And they were
mm,
some of the, in those days, Ken, I had one ancient army, I had one Napoleonic army. And there's something to be said. I'm sure it was Peter Young who said, it's only the fool that digresses and has all kinds of different kinds of periods and all kinds of different armies. And
yeah.
you can tell that I really paid attention to that because I've got so many figures. But those days were so much fun because you knew what you had, and so I'd spend ages trying to work out the best tactics for the army of northern Italy with Prince Eugene in charge, knowing that
Yeah.
he was taking on Archduke John across the river,
Mm,
knowing that Cookie had the old guard and were placing the Russians, and there was a grand battle.
mm.
It was fantastic, and of course, as you can imagine, at a war games club, the president was Napoleon because
Of
that's how he
course,
saw it.
of course. Yeah,
Cookie was Davout because that's how he saw it, and I was this little Italian stepson on the side, and that suited me perfectly. You go
yeah.
take care of that village on the flank. Yeah, okay, I'll do that. They're fond memories, but we would have had thousands and thousands of figures on the table. We would have played for 3 days, and let me tell you, the only reason that we would have ended up packing that up is because the aerobics class would have turned up on the Monday afternoon. That would have been the only reason we would have had to pack up
Yeah.
the hall.
Brilliant. It seems to be, and I'm not wrong with this, but the move from big game towards skirmish game seems to be more prevalent at the moment. Is that something that you've noticed in Australia? Is it a similar sort of
Oh,
setup?
100%, 100%, 100%. It's games like Saga,
Mm,
games like where we talked about Chain of Command. Chain of Command is
yeah.
really a very small World War II skirmish action. Um, I think skirmish games they do have an attraction. If you're there on a
Mm,
Wednesday night, you're turning up at 7 o'clock, you've had a big day. You don't want to be spending 2 hours setting up, playing for an
mm,
hour, and then spending an hour packing it away. I can understand that. Skirmish games, I don't mind them, but
mm,
if I had my choice, I'd rather play a larger scale game. It's one of the reasons why in the last year, um, even though I've got a vast Napoleonic 28mm collection, when I say vast, I mean it's a big collection.
mm,
We've started, 8 or 9 of us have started building 15mm collections just so we
mm.
can play a good game of General to Army at the club on a Wednesday night, really to get all over the rules. We can play
Yeah.
15mm, there's 3 or 4 brigades aside, plus a reserve. Um, Primarily, in my case, so that when the 28s come out, it just runs like clockwork. So the 15mm is almost like it's like our training pitch to be able to
Yeah.
play those games at the club. And once we've started doing that, suddenly Napoleonic Wargaming has had another resurgence at the club, which is a great result as well.
Have you ever done the dreaded War Games figure count? Do you know how many figures you have?
Uh, No, only because that would be a very unwise move, Ken. No, I haven't.
You haven't?
No, and it would be pure speculation.
Yeah.
Allegedly, Ken,
Yeah.
I have many tens of
Allegedly.
thousands, but I can neither confirm nor deny that. Nor
No,
can, just on the odd chance that my wife is listening.
True.
No.
Somebody asked me when I was on their podcast a long time ago now, probably 3 years ago, and I did the similar thing, and I went, "What? I can't remember. I have no idea. I've got no idea." So, as all war gamers do, I was pottering around the Wargames room, not doing very much, and I'd had a couple of glasses of whiskey, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to count them.
Oh, jeez. How long did that take? Couple.
It took about a week and a half to get it all done. But yeah, so I have done it now, and so I do have an accurate number, and
How
I've
many do you
kept
have,
it up
Ken?
to 29,200-ish.
And that's all 28s?
So, no, that's a mix of stuff. But
because you're getting into 10s now as well, aren't you?
Yeah, well, that is actually if people haven't seen it yet on my various social media, I've been working on my 28mm Italian Wars of Independence, my Garibaldi stuff
Beautiful
for
figures.
over a year, and I just needed a break. And I've had this box of figures for years. I've never done anything with them, and I bought a couple of packs 15 years ago, and I was looking to build a certain army, and the Grenadiers weren't right. So I emailed the company back and said, "Look, I'm really sorry. I bought these. They're great figures, but the Grenadiers are right. Any chance you could send me some Grenadiers to replace the ones you've got? I'm happy to send the other ones back." So next day or next week, a package comes through the door with 2 army packs in with the wrong Grenadiers again.
Oh, no.
So I emailed the manufacturer back and said, "Brilliant, fantastic service, but you've sent me the wrong Grenadiers again." And just as a passing comment, I've now got 4 army packs with the wrong Grenadiers. And guess what happened a week later? 4 army packs arrived.
Jeez Louise.
And again, all with the wrong Grenadiers.
Oh,
So,
no.
so I didn't dare email them back because it was like growing exponentially. I didn't dare say I've now got 8 army packs of the wrong Grenadiers, so I just ordered the Grenadiers separately. So that's how I've got to have a couple of thousand of these figures, and I've never done anything with them. So I just started it as a break.
Well, they shouldn't count. They shouldn't count in your count, Ken. For at the end of the day, they're manna from heaven. Okay, they're just they're miracle figures. Okay, that don't necessarily have to be in the count.
They just happen to be lying around, and keeping me going, keeping the paint brush going.
Ken, I've got to think. I've got to think my numbers would be around the same. Okay.
Yeah.
I've been wargaming since I was 14, avidly, and the advantage has been. And gosh, I think of the figures I've sold, and you wish you hadn't sold them, but it is what it is, But it's a lot of figures,
Yeah. Something I've never done. So do you get rid of collections when you're fed up with them?
I'm going through a cull at the moment. I'm actually, if I haven't played with these figures for a long period of time, I'm actually sorting them out and then putting them up. If they've been in boxes, and for example, I've got a stack of painted figures that I hadn't played with for ages, and it's pointless having them there. I wouldn't have taken them out on the table for 15 years, and my tastes have changed, and probably my painting quality has changed. And so sometimes you'll virtually gift them to somebody, some young gamers who are starting off, or you'll some of the better stuff, which is surplus to requirements. How many legios can you have in Lorica Segmenta? How many late Roman armies can you have? So you just move some of them. And what I've got to the stage now, Ken, is that I try and let the hobby pay for the hobby. So
Yeah.
if I want to commission Chris to paint up a brigade of Kelpo Prussians, well, that funding has to come from my own collection. So that
Right.
could be unpainted castings, which I once again unfortunately have many. It's like Del
Yeah.
Boy and Rodney having enough lead for the Russian nuclear fallout. Um,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of lead here. So it might be unpainted castings. It might be figures that just don't fit in with my collection anymore, or the direction of my wargaming that I want my wargaming to go. So I tend to do that, and that tends to keep me fairly honest in terms of what comes into the collection. Every now and again, I'll have something extravagant done.
Mm.
Doug Mason recently put together just a superb 32-man Zastrel Cuirassiers connoisseur figures in 28s
Mm.
for my Napoleonic collection, and every single figure has been sculpted, modified,
Yeah.
reins, swords, pins, and
Oh,
every now and again
he's
you have one of those. It's beautiful.
he's just an absolute master of his art, isn't he, Doug? It's amazing stuff.
He's a
Amazing
gentleman.
stuff.
He's a gentleman. He's a lovely
Brilliant.
bloke. Lovely bloke.
So just to finish off this little section, then, if you wanted to give some advice to somebody new to the hobby about getting into big games or big gaming, what would you kind of say or do to encourage people?
Oh, you know what? Push your way in. Just don't be shy.
Yeah.
Come up to a game and let me tell you, the guys pushing around all those battalions, for starters, we're all getting older. It's hard pushing all that lead around. We could use another brigade commander. So just feel free to say, you know what, I really like this. And any wargamer worth their salt will say, you know what, come on in. If you don't feel confident enough to take a command, just sit back, ask some questions, see what's going on. I would encourage it, because at the end of the day, when I was a younger guy, Ken, I had a whole lot of minifig strip figures. that's
Mm.
what that's what I painted up, and that's how I got started. And so
Yeah.
it's never a case of, oh, I'll never have that kind of collection. Well, you don't need to have that kind of collection.
Yeah.
You have to. It's like I love to go out on a boat. Well, you don't need a boat. You just need a friend that's got a boat.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Exactly.
all you need to do is paint up some command figures, maybe your own brigade, like you used to take up to the
Mm.
holiday centre in your deals with Jerry and Mike, and
Mm.
maybe paint up a brigade, maybe paint up a battalion, and just get
Mm.
started that way. And I think once you've played in a big game where you have all those varying levels of command confusion, um, even in a colonial game in the Sudan, once you've commanded a regiment and you're hoping that side of the square holds because those fuzzy wuzzies aren't that far away, um, yeah, I think you'll go off and think, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing this. I'll dip my toe in the water and see what I can do.
Yeah, a lot of people say to me, I can't do it, and I can't remember. I think it's probably one of my old games teachers or something like that would say there's no such word as can't. You can always try, and having a go, like you say, that's brilliant advice. Having a go, getting involved in a game with somebody at a club or something like that, and it might not be for you. You might prefer skirmish gaming, but don't write it off. And there's always old blokes like me and Carlo who are desperate to get some extra gamers at our table. So please come along and join in and get involved in a bit of big gaming. That's what this podcast has started for. On my little crusade in my elder years of wargaming. Uh, so that's a great little finish to that section, mate. So we will move on to the Yorkshire Gamer quiz. And we're back with the Yorkshire Gamer quiz, and it's a bit of fun, as we always have on this show. And just a little disclaimer at the start: we're not meaning to upset anybody during the course of this quiz, although we probably will do. So I'll just apologise now. So you've it's just a test of how Yorkshire gamer are you, not how much of a good a gamer or how good a gamer you are. So are you ready to go, mate?
I'm ready.
Let's see if this translates to Australia, because it's quite regional in some of the
Okay.
questions. But there we go. So, question one: go big or go home?
Oh, go big.
Go big. Contrast paints. Do you think they're great or are they a gimmick?
I know people who love them, but I think they're a gimmick.
Awesome. Paintbrushes. Are you using overpriced Southern-made Winsor and Newton, or fine quality made down the road in Skipton Pro Art?
Pro Art's when I can get my hands on them.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'll put you down on their mailing list, mate.
Oh,
I'll get
please
you to
do. Please do.
ship them, ship you some. It's still on my to-do list is to get them on the program, and I will do. I
Oh,
will
it'd be
do.
a good idea.
96 figures. Is that an army or a unit of pike?
Oh, it's almost a forlorn hope, really, isn't it? That's a
Excellent.
unit of pike.
like where you're coming from. Like where you're coming from. A 6x4 table. Would you class that as a big game or a small game?
That's like a staging table, Ken.
Oh, staging tables. How we're talking. Those tables at the back of the Wargames Holiday Centre where you just have like billions of figures ready to come on.
It's just unbelievable. I mean, it really is. Look, and I'm being a bit facetious there. Believe me, we play on a 6x4 at the club in 15 mil, and only because it's a space thing because we have so many people. But if I've got a choice, go big or go home.
Yeah, acreage. That's what it's all about. Question 6. Would you prefer a points-based army or an historical order of battle?
Historical order of battle every time.
Well, we're doing very well so far. And another painting question. Would you go for a wet palette or an old bit of MDF to mix your paints?
Yeah, I've got a wet palette hidden away somewhere, which I've never used. MDF and my blocking sheet of paper, which has about every single colour that I've actually got in my whole paint rack, is represented on my blotting pad.
Excellent. That's what I like to see. I don't want to claim any credit, but wet palettes are going out of fashion since this podcast started. So
I'm glad to hear. I might get some money for mine.
Your undercoat in figures. Do you use black or white undercoat?
I tend to use black, but as my eyesight's setting to go, I use black and then I dry brush lightly with Foundry Rebel Grey 11C. There you go. I'm looking at it right now. Only so it brings out a little bit of the detail for my eyes.
So that's I think they call that zenithal high priming is the new terminology for that.
Yeah, that sounds a bit rude, actually.
Yeah, some one of the kids who've been on the program explained that to me.
Oh gosh, there you go.
There you go.
And I thought I was just hard of I couldn't see.
Yeah, I was confused, and it's like, what are we talking about? Anyway, so I do learn something every now and again. So question 9: hot drink, Yorkshire tea or dirty mucky coffee?
Oh, Yorkshire tea every time.
Awesome, excellent.
Extra strong.
Is it available down there in Australia?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I could take you downstairs, and in the pantry there would be Yorkshire tea and extra strong Yorkshire tea in very fancy boxes.
Brilliant. My lad's just been working at Camp America, and about a week in, he said, "Dad, I can't do this Lipton's tea." And they have it cold as well. You need to say. So I airlifted some Yorkshire tea to him in New York State. Bless him. So
well, obviously, it was a humanitarian effort from the United Nations up there in Yorkshire. Well done, Ken.
It should have been airdropped, shouldn't it?
Parachuted in, exactly right. Along with an old char lady right down next to
her. Yeah. It's like the Berlin airlift, but in 2022. So, Wargames units, if it's historically accurate, do you prefer tightly packed or socially distanced?
Oh, tightly packed.
Tightly packed. We love a tightly packed unit on here. 2-hour club game or a weekend monster game?
Once again, a weekend monster game with the potential to go into sick days in the working week. Keep it going.
Yeah. The latest, I don't know if you've seen it, the WSS Wargames survey they do every year.
Yes, do it religiously.
Yeah, yeah, and they have a question on there. What is the average time for a game that you would like? And I think it was like under an hour, 3 hours, 6 hours, more than 6 hours. And I emailed them back and said, "Do you mean days?"
Did you get a response?
Yeah, Jasper got back to me and said, we might include that next time.
Oh, they should. That would be funny.
So, question 12, doing very well so far. Avocado, is it just posh mushy peas?
Yes, I live in Australia, Ken. Avocado is like everyone has avocado. It's I'd have to. I'm sorry, mate. I'm going to have to say
Sorry.
no. It's
No. So does that like literally grow on trees in Australia? Is it one of you?
you can't go to a place. I mean, every second person's ordering avocado on toast with poached eggs. It's avocados are everywhere at the moment, and they're cheap as chips. So at the moment they are. That is.
Yeah. Don't be shipping them over here. Don't be sending them to us.
No. Hey, don't get me wrong. I like mushy peas more than an ex-bloke, but I don't mind my avocado either.
Yeah, I think kind of Birmingham and North is the avocado line.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's not official, but I'm sure there's a line on a map somewhere that says it. The universal question, so don't let me down with this, Carlo. Everyone has answered this the same way so far, and that's round dice. Are they spherical dice? Are they allowed or banned on your table?
Oh, banned. I hate round dice.
Banned, 100%. Excellent. Somebody tried to buy me some and they couldn't find any, which was a good thing.
you've probably gone there beforehand, thrown them all out.
Yeah,
They might as well be like the old-fashioned Dungeons and Dragons. Remember, you used to have a 20-sided dice.
Yeah,
You know, because they'll just roll forever, and the amount of spears and shields they knock off.
Yeah. It's like being 7 or 8 again and rolling marbles at your figures. But the figures cost pence then, and now they're a couple of quid and £10 worth of painting on top. So
absolutely,
yeah, maybe not. You're going down the chippy. You like fish and chip shops in Australia?
I love fish and chip shops. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Are you? Do you prefer haddock or cod?
This will surprise you, Ken. I'm not a fish eater. Okay,
Ooh.
I love the chips. The chips. Okay, I'll even go so far as have a potato cake or two. But everyone else in the house will have fish, and over here I think it's flake, which is code for shark, and dewfish, which are the main fish that are in our seas, our waters over here. So cod and what was the other one? Haddock. Yeah, no, I couldn't tell you. Not being the fish eater I am, Ken. Sorry, I plead the fifth.
And do Australian fish and chip shops do gravy and peas and curry and all that sort of stuff?
Not the ones I go to. It's mainly fish and chips. In the old days, you used to be able to get a hamburger and a thing called a Chico roll, which was a way of most of the pie manufacturers getting rid of all their refuse, I think, and putting it into a nice battered cylinder, which tasted tremendous when I was younger. I've got to be honest. Mate, if I'm having fish and chips, it's I'm probably cooking a hamburger at home these days. That's right. Lots of salt and vinegar, though. Lots of salt and vinegar.
Do you like a good table and a set of rules, like a casualty table or something similar?
I do. I know it's not popular, but anyone who's seen the Sudan rules will see that there are tables there.
Yeah, I love a table, and I don't know what the problem is. I love a good table. I think a lot of it's down to the fact that I do quite complex maths at work. So looking at a table and cross-referencing, or adding one for elite and taking one off for soft cover isn't stretching my mathematical knowledge that much.
No.
So I don't really have a problem with it.
But you Ken, I don't know if you ever played WRG sixth edition rules, and which were what were they, Phil Barker's? But you'd run down the list, +1 Army Standard, General blah. What's the problem? I've prepared for that. My general's within command range, etc., etc. I don't see the problem, but I understand that people want to get on with it, and a 4, 5, or 6 and you're dead, and a 5 and 6 and you save, and they're the general rules, and that's fine. I understand that, but I'm not threatened by a table.
No, I love it. I love a table, and I'm proud to say that I do. 28 mil is king. Yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
17 unpainted miniatures allowed on the table. Yes or no?
No.
Excellent. No bias here with me wearing a Bradford City shirt, but Bradford City or Leeds United.
Ken, this is interesting. I'm a Southampton supporter. Okay, I follow the Saints since '76 when they beat United in the FA Cup final, and
I remember that game.
I watched us lose 1-0 to United on the weekend. Mad Saints supporter. Look, a lot of Australians went and played for Leeds.
Harry Kewell. I'm thinking Harry Kewell.
Mark Viduka.
As well. Yes.
They were good players. Yeah. They were good players. But you know what? What kind of a guest would I be if, I turned my back on you, Ken? So I think the answer is obvious.
That's what I like. I can't think. James Meredith is an Australian. I think he played left back for Australia a couple of times. Played for Bradford City a few years ago.
Oh, well, there we go. There we go. There's the link.
There's the link. The dizzy heights of...
I don't feel like a charlatan anymore. I feel like a genuine man.
James Meredith. In fact, I think he might have ended up at Perth. What's the football team called in Perth?
Perth Glory.
Perth Glory. That's it. Yeah.
Very unfortunate chap. That's a terrible place to end up your career.
Yeah.
We're struggling at the moment. Perth Glory struggling.
Did Robbie Fowler manage?
He certainly did. Yeah. Well, he certainly played for us, and then I think he managed the Brisbane Roar. Went up to Queensland and did it. But he played for us, Robbie Fowler. I mean, geez, he was a brilliant player in his day. I mean, I think Robbie was over for a holiday, but other than that, that's okay. Enjoy the sun, Robbie.
Yeah, holiday and a wage packet. Well, there we go.
That's right.
Question 19. Yorkshire or the other place over the hill?
Oh, it has to be Yorkshire.
Brilliant. And finally, Games Workshop. Are they the work of the devil? Yes or no?
Oh, they have a place, Ken. They have. I'll answer that by saying their marketing people are the work of the devil. I think how they market and price things is a disgrace. But geez, some of their figures are beautiful. They really are. Yeah. I just wish I didn't have to sell the children to be able to buy 2 or 3 of them. That's all. I'm sure that the same all over the world. The Games Workshop shop, you walk in and the sell starts almost immediately. Yeah. Particularly if you're grandmother with those 13 and 14-year-old, or not even 13, 9 or 10-year-old grandkids. I don't like that. Yeah. I think the hard sell's a bit too much, and the constant changing, and no, it's not for me. But there are some beautiful. I mean, I love Blood Bowl. I think it's a great gaming system. I really like Space Hulk. I think that's a really good system. Some of their paints are worthwhile, in terms of using them alongside the Valleos and the Color Masters and those other bits and pieces. But yeah, if I could take a flamethrower to the marketing department, I think I would.
Excellent. Well, you've done extremely well. I've given you a couple of half marks on some questions for that weird highlighting thing that you did. But that's 85%, which is definitely in the upper quartile of people who've been on the show. So thanks very much for doing that.
Well, the most southern Bradford supporter in the world. There we go.
Exactly. So that moves on to the feature that's been on the show for quite a while now, actually, and that's the Wargames Room 101. And people remember George Orwell's 1984, and there was a room of horror called Room 101 where you would put your deepest, darkest fears. And it turned into a TV show here in the UK. And I thought I'd bring it back onto this podcast and allow people kind of open and free attempt to shove one of their personal wargame pet hates into Room 101. And we've had some crackers in the past. Have you managed to come up with one, Carlo?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Oh, he's got one. He's got one. Go on then, mate. What have we come up with?
Ken, it links back to dice, okay? But
Yeah.
I can't stand playing a game with an opponent whose dice I can barely see the dots on it. Okay. So a whole lot of dice are rolled. You need fours to hit, and the dice are rolled, and you're struggling to be able to see because it's like a gold dice with silver dots or whatever it may be. And look, I like my wargaming friends. I enjoy playing with them. I don't trust all of them, that's for sure, okay? Especially when it's a crucial part of the battle. You know, 4, was that a 4? Because I could have sworn that was a 2. But so I dislike dice that I can't see easily, okay? Particularly when my opponent is using them at a critical juncture in the battle. So all dice should be visible. It should almost be flashing neons or black on white. Whatever happened to black on white dice? You can't seem to get them anymore. Everyone wants these fancy colours.
So it's the contrast between the face of the dice and the dots.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, a black dice with an obsidian dot. It doesn't sit well with me. Okay, black on white or white on red or something like that, please. Should be banned. Should be banned.
What are your thoughts then on alternative faced dice? And what I mean, we had a guy who brought in some dice and they had Roman numerals on, for example. Is that on the borderline, or is that acceptable?
Well, cannot I know my Roman numerals. I'm not threatened by a little bit of that. I think that's quite funny and innovative. And as long as I can see that V is for 5 and I could see it, I'm a happy man. Yeah. You know, so I've got no problem with that at all. I tell you what, I don't like. I don't like those dice where they'll have the 1 is represented by like an eagle or a drum or something like that. And I think they come out of China, and whenever I've had them, they invariably roll 1s because of the weighting. Yeah. They're just poorly done. I don't particularly like those dice. But in terms of having Roman numerals on it or something like that, I've got no problem with game systems that use 4-sided or 10-sided dice or 12-sided dice. In fact, the Sudan does all of that in homage to what Peter Gilder used to do at the Holiday Centre. But as long as I can see the number or I can see what's on the dice, I've got no problem with that at all, Ken.
Yeah, I mean we've had somebody at our club who turned up with some Hebrew dice, and of course, not other than him, none of us knew what the symbols were. So yeah.
I admire his chutzpah again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was a nice try. It was a nice try, but yeah. No, I can't disagree with that. That's another cracking one to lock into the vault of Room 101, which is ever growing. I didn't know whether it'd last and whether we'd run out of stuff that people hate, but clearly we're nowhere. We don't even scratch the surface yet.
You have only just started to scratch the surface, Ken. Believe me, believe me. You're gonna have to lock this up and put it into the deepest, darkest depths of the North Sea.
Yeah, this is the part of the show that gets the most complaints, without a shadow of a doubt.
Why? What do people complain about?
Because they get upset. They get upset. You see. We had one of my dear old Wargames friends, Stephen Barker. He put pale blue primary school Blue Rivers terrain in. Oh, some people on Twitter didn't like that. My word. It was.
I'll tell you anyway, what, we still have the debate at our club about. We go back to the old days about chalk on the table.
Oh,
Jesus Christ! People nearly came to blows.
Well, that's brilliant, mate. Thanks once again for that. And we're going to be back in a minute and we're going to talk about our big topic. Well, welcome to the big topic section of the show. And at the end of the show, we always speak to our guests about a particular topic that's close to their hearts. And we're going to be talking about, as we mentioned at the start, the rule set Sands of Sudan. But the first thing I'm going to ask Carla before we start is to talk about a little bit about colonial wargaming, because it's not something that we've talked about on the podcast before. It's not something that I don't think I think I might have played one game in the past. So, just for the listeners out there, Carlo, what is colonial wargaming?
It's it's an interesting question, Ken, because colonial wargaming has a lot of connotations, in terms
Mm,
of you've got European troops going off and basically beating up the natives, so to speak,
yeah.
and this, that, and the other.
Mm,
If you want it to be that, it can be that. Okay,
mm,
and you know what? It may well have been that many, many, many years ago, but at the
mm,
end of the day, I think the modern take on colonial wargaming is that you're taking on a wily opponent in their own territory and in their own familiar surroundings, often with chaps who have just literally walked off a bus and gone into the enlisting office there in London or up at Manchester or Birmingham or whatever
yeah.
it may be, or off to South Africa like the New South Wales Regiment, in the Boer War.
Mm,
Colonial wargaming can even be deemed to be French Indian Wars, really, in terms of
mm,
how you look at it. So, colonial gaming. I was introduced to colonial gaming from once again some of the expat boys at the club, the Cookie and Mike. Um, Certainly in the early days, Sword in the Flame there was a popularity with Sword in the Flame.
mm.
The excellent rule set. The the chap who wrote them, his name Larry Brom, put them together, and
So I
that was
thought I had a
interesting.
copy behind me, but I haven't.
You know what, I think every wargamer has, of
Yeah.
our vintage. So
Mm,
the colonial game can be whatever you want it to be. I mean, you've had people say, oh well, the Boer War, what's the point of fighting, the Boer War, you've got the Boers there, they run and they shoot and they hide. Well, it's a modern ambush skirmish game. You're doing the same thing if you're doing anything in Afghanistan or doing anything in Somalia um, or any of those mercenary actions that were so popular when I was going through in the 80s. We all watched
mm.
Dogs of War and watched the Wild Geese, and we wanted to have little mercenary actions in these fictional African countries. So in effect, that's a colonial game. Um,
Mm,
so the scope is huge. The ability to play on a lot of different fronts is interesting. A lot of different nationalities, because of course
mm,
a lot of colonial powers. You had the Belgians, of course. I mean, who fights
mm.
Belgian troops these days other than in the
Yeah.
Napoleonics or in the colonies? So those kind of
Mm,
bits and pieces. Australian gamers, obviously the Boer War, but also the Sudan, which was the
mm,
first war where Australian troops went. Um, so it provides a lot of scope. You can play it as small as you want. You can play it as big as you want. And of
mm.
course, who'll ever forget some of those beautiful games of recreations of Island Dwana in the old wargaming magazines? Superb.
Mm. Yeah, and was that one of the things that got you into it, as well as those friends, those pictures in those early war games magazines of um, that that sort of game, the Sudan games from Peter Gilder?
Without a shadow of a doubt, Ken,
Mm,
when you grab those early miniature war games and the War Games Illustrated, you were just captured by those photos, particularly the way Duncan took them. I mean, you hear the stories
mm,
after Duncan's passed away of what he would do in the photo and the camera that he would set up and the old plates and
yeah.
how he would just picture things. And you know what? It shows. It
Mm,
shows that he cared and loved what he did, and he
mm,
knew that that a picture painted 1,000 words. And so you looked at those pictures, and for me, this little boy in working class Midland getting the train into the
mm.
city to buy those magazines whenever they came out and hoping they'd, and of course they'd come out 3 months after they came out in England because I'd have to come over on the ship, of course.
Yeah.
And so you'd find a place that had it, and you'd look through this
Mm,
magazine and you devoured every single word and you saw every single detail in the picture. And then Sudan specials came out. I mean, when I say the Sudan specials, the article's about Sudan by Peter Gilder. And he's talking about this game that started at the Wargames Holiday Centre, which was really just a change-up. They would play a particular game on, a Napoleonic game, and the people are staying for the week. And this was just, I don't know, what would you call it? It was almost like a palate cleanser for the war gamers at the centre. It was something. It was something just to change things. But my God, I mean, the scope of it was unbelievable, and the brilliance of being able to have all the players there against the umpire. It's us against them, and who doesn't like us against them?
Yeah.
And from I never met Peter Gilder. I never had the pleasure. But all the stories I hear is that a bigger storyteller, raconteur, showman you couldn't find. And so the Sudan rules that he played, or the Sudan games he played, the reason there were never any rules is because most of it was up here. He was like an historical dungeon master. And if the game was going in a particular direction, he would take it on another direction, and that was the attraction of it. And you saw these pictures of these squares holding off what seemed to be thousands and thousands of figures of Beja and Hadendowa and Ansar and all these troops and camel troops coming over the. And how could you not think, well, this is pretty special? So a couple of my mates decided that they were going to try and put this on. Okay, and they had a few scraps of notes and things like that. And so the first Sudan game I played was with Phil Cook and Mike Ward, and Cookies from Basingstoke and Wardies from Leicester. And they put the game on. And we went from there. It was a little bit haphazard because it was, we were working off little snippets of paper, old, almost see-through handwritten sheets. But it had a charm, and I knew even at that stage that there was that this had a charm that needed exploration.
Before we talk about the rules themselves, is it a figure collection that you've built up yourself as well? Have you?
I have a big Sudan collection, as you can imagine. Quite a few of them feature in the rules. I also have a whole lot of French Foreign Legion, the old redoubt French Foreign Legion and Arabs, the Tuaregs and stuff like that, just waiting for me to put together, because the advantage of these rules is that you really, the us against the umpire type mentality is transferable onto so many theatres. So, but my main colonial collection, the major colonial collection I have, is the Sudan.
Is that 28mm?
All connoisseurs. I mean, 98% of them are connoisseur miniatures.
And the Gilder collection, the photographs of that collection that was in the magazines. Do you happen to know where those figures are now? Are they still with Mark? Or
I believe that some of them are with Dave Thomas, because I think Dave Thomas has got a few of them, and I believe that Keith Leedy, who was the connoisseur agent in North America, I believe Keith. I don't believe. I know that Keith has a good, healthy part of the collection as well, and so he has. I've actually seen in some of the games on Jim's excellent blog, Adult Fritz, where they play some games in I think it was in Jim's basement, and some of the old. Do you remember the Oasis with the woman washing her cloth? And they're in Keith's collection there in North America. So I have one unit here plus a screw gun and a naval gun, which Chris Cornwall sold me and said that they were part of the Gilder collection. Because Chris, of course, was the connoisseur agent for a while in the UK.
Yeah.
After Chris Gilder went over.
That's amazing to hear that they're still around somewhere. I always like to track these figures down, and very similar for me with the Italian Wars was those early pictures in the magazines of Peter's collection, and then seeing a lot of those at the Italian Wars weekend I did at the Holiday Centre. It was almost as if there was like a glowing aura from this particular, the units that had been around for. It was probably like a smell from thousands of wargamers moving them around over the years. But it's definite to say that those early magazines had massive influence on so many people with those photographs. I think if I remember rightly, they were in the very early ones. There was maybe there was the front cover and the back cover in colour, and then maybe 3 or 4 colour pages.
That's right.
And the effect that they had on me and quite clearly on you was quite profound.
Well, Ken, do you remember when they brought out Wargames World? They had 5 issues
Mm.
of Wargames World, the yellow cover.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, I remember those. Yeah,
and then that's where the Gilders Sudan got a real run,
yeah,
and
mm.
you've got gunships, you've got steamboats, you've got what more could you want?
Yeah. I think the variety of unit types and different things that you can have is one of the big draws, isn't it, for the colonial
Oh,
period?
absolutely, absolutely,
Mm,
and it's funny, you on the we'll talk about the rules a little bit later on, but on their
mm,
day, the Hadendower, the Ansar, the Fuzzy Wuzzies, and they can run through an Imperial Square. If they get the right
yeah,
set of rolls, it's all over.
yeah. Yeah, so that's not a good sign. So, when was your first contact then with that set of rules?
Well, when I first met Mike,
Mm,
Mike Ingham and Jerry Elliott, we touched on it
mm,
briefly when I was playing that Austerlitz game that 15 years before I think I'd played a colonial game with Cookie and Mike Ward, and would it be okay to try and do something? And then Mike passed away, and
mm,
I contacted
mm,
Jerry again a few years afterwards, and said, Jerry, look, do you mind if I put this together?
mm,
Um, it's something that I really want to do, and Jerry was fantastic. He was very, very supportive. Um, and then he sold the business, his part of the business, and then Mark
mm.
took over the running of it. And the setup with
Yeah,
Holiday Centre now, and Mark was very generous of it too. Once he found out what the intention was, he was very supportive as well. And then
mm,
that started the whole investigation, the whole
yeah,
research job.
yeah.
It was interesting.
You were strapping your big broad hat on and cracking the whip and firing the pistol and going off into the deep dark depths of mines to find old bits of paper with rules on.
Absolutely, trying to fill the gaps, trying to
Yeah.
fill the gaps, Ken. Because and believe me, there were gaps. You know,
Mm,
a couple of prime. Peter was Peter was very well known, and people who have known him very well
mm.
would share this and say, but Peter wasn't adverse to taking the best bits out of other bits and pieces
Yeah. Yeah.
and making them his own in in that roguish kind of fashion that he did. And I'm sure Robbie Roddis would have told you a lot of all that
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Robbie's
Yeah.
blog, and it's fantastic,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it was a way of course, he based the whole concept of the dice determining what the natives would do on an excellent set of rules called Pony Wars, or B
Yeah.
Troop Ain't Coming Back by
Mm,
Ian Beck, of which
yeah.
I've got about 5 copies on my shelf because once again I would read it and just think this is the best set of rules in the world. Why can't I play it?
Yeah.
It was just a scale. Once again, I came across it when I was quite young, and they've just re-released Pony Wars, by the way.
Yes, they have.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the production values of that and what they're doing for that, believe me, once I've put a few things aside, there's another distraction that's going to cost me a lot of pounds. But there we. But he took a lot of that from Pony Wars. He also took
Mm,
bits and pieces from Newbury's Colonial Rules, and I just so happen to have an old set of Newbury Colonial Rules, which Paul Young and I used to play Zulu Wars with. And it
mm,
was an old fashioned set of rules, but there were ranges and charts in there that were taken directly from the Newbury rules and put into Peter's charts. You could
mm.
see where the charts were. And so that started to fill the gaps. You started to work out, okay, well, this gun has this kind of firing rate. It has this kind of fires 4 men. And of course, the Sudan has the mother of all casualty charts, as you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
in terms of number of figures firing compared to the fire factor. And that fire factor,
Mm,
and it was very important to me when I was doing this to be respectful of the tradition of the rules.
yeah.
It would have been very easy for me to come along and put my own modern take on this set of rules. Now that would have been wrong on every single stage, because we're talking about a set of rules that was used to fight some of the most iconic war games ever captured by any wargaming magazine, hobby magazine ever. I don't know anybody that is a war game of our generation who wasn't absolutely captured by those images. So it had to be respectful of that tradition of the rules. That was paramount. It would have been really easy to put charts like we were talking about before, 4, 5s, and 6s, and modify, but that wasn't what it's about. This is a set of rules that grew out of the 80s, when in my mind, some of my fondest wargaming memories. And so it had to be very respectful of that, not only for his legacy and his memory, but also all the guys that played these games at the Holiday Centre. The worst thing that I could possibly have put together is a take on these rules, and these guys will say, "Well, what's this bloody Aussie done with this? This is crap." It had to be in the spirit of Peter Gilder and the Wargames Holiday Centre of the 80s and 90s. It had to be. And I hope that's what we've achieved.
Yeah, so it was very much a reproduction of the rules rather than a rewriting of the rules.
I probably describe myself as an editor of these rules.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think I have my name on it, but it's inspired by Peter Gilder, because I see myself as an editor of the rules. I've managed to pull a lot of the bits and pieces together, and that was an exercise in itself, Ken, because once I put the blog up with pajamas through the desert, I asked the question. I said, "Listen, if you've ever played the game, if you ever were at the Holiday Centre, if you ever had a mate that was at the Holiday Centre, please email me. Tell me about the scenarios you played. Give me your fondest memories." Wow. I tell you what, it opened the floodgates. And so these guys were saying, "You know what, I'm 80-something now, but I remember going down there with my son. We played this game. The steamer got stuck on the cataract. He wrote about it in the rules. I still remember Peter snapping off the funnel and putting it there, and the Gatling gun jammed, and and just the joy coming out of these emails was fantastic." And so,
I think a lot of the things, though I've not played it, the big feeling that I've got about these rules is that they've produced some amazing narrative games, where people are not getting involved in the 15 inches to do that or the +1 for this. They're getting involved in the story of the game and the story of the units. And I think it was on one of your blog posts, the story where some unit had led 4 charges or something like that, and the officer had been killed on the final charge, and Peter put a little red dot on the table where that had happened. And those are the sorts of stories I love, where you bring in those little metal or plastic figures to life,
it's the history
and
of our
giving them
hobby,
a
Ken.
person. Yeah.
It's the history of our hobby, and so you look at it and you say, okay, you remember that, you remember the story, you remember the whole technique of rolling the Nordenfelt, okay, or the and having it jam, right at the critical time. Do I take those extra rounds, or do I risk the gun jamming? The whole thing of ambushes, that everyone's going through these particular areas and they're scared stiff, because they're not sure if they're going to unleash a one base ambush, or suddenly 400 camels come out of a wadi or something like that. It's the scope of it's fantastic, and of course, if you've got someone who's umpiring the game, it's ideal for solo play as well, of course, because of course you've got the generation of the native forces are all randomly generated. Okay, so their movement, their actions are all determined by charts and what's going on in the game. So you can easily play it solo, but if you're playing it with a few people, and there's all these little side stories going on. The commander of the 21st Lancers owes the B Squadron commander owes a whole lot of money to the chap who's running the Camerons, And so in his mind, he's the colonel of the Camerons, and he wants to make sure that bloke doesn't die. Okay, so he's sending him to all these secret places whilst the other A, C, and D squadrons are all doing all the charges, while B is on reconnaissance somewhere. And all these brilliant little subplots which we all saw in the Hollywood movies. Okay, and we can just put them into our games, and it just adds that level of depth to a particular game, which is what we're all looking for.
So, but looking back at the blog, with pajamas in the desert, the first thing, there's a little story on your blog about how that name came about. So, where did that come from?
I'll tell you what, it was my old warrant officer. Is that the story that went with my old warrant officer in the reserves? So he couldn't say Pagano. He said, Pagano, what's that? What's that? And he said, oh, it's Italian German. And he was Welsh. And he said, oh, well, you couldn't pick a winner in both wars. So he called me Pajamas. He couldn't say Pagano, so it was Pajamas. So and in the end, he was a harsh man. He was a very harsh man. So he that ended up being my nickname, Pajamas, during that particular venture into the reserves, the territorials, I should call them. So that was good fun, and it stuck. I still get called Pajamas at the cricket club, and for some reason, these Australians just can't pronounce these multiphonic names.
Yeah, it is a bit worrying. So that blog I looked at. I think the first post was June 2013. How much have you managed to put together and piece together at the time that first post come out?
That was probably one of the tasters. That was the attempt to get the rules out there. Hey, look, there's this chap down here. He's trying to get this moving along. Send through your memories, send through your thoughts, and any information you might have. So, in 2013, probably about 75% of it was getting put together. I've been working on that for a few years, and then information came in, and then the discovery of the Newbury rules was great. Can I tell you, Ken, with the publication of the latest Pony War rules, there was one particular thing which I still wasn't sure of. Okay, and suddenly it's as clear as day. And
wow.
Okay, so I'll be putting that up as online, just saying, hey guys, this is what we do. Okay, because that's what it was based on. I remember getting in touch with Ian's friends after I'd put the Sudan rules out, and saying, hey, are you guys doing anything with Pony Wars? And that was quite a few years ago. I said, no, look, Carlo, thanks, but we've got a plan for it. And geez, they've done a great job of it. It's been fantastic. Yeah, so the whole so by that stage, it was a case of, okay, so I've got all the information. What am I going to do? How am I going to put this together? How am I going to get this out there? I'm fortunate that somehow I fell into outside of university. I fell into the printing industry. So I had a lot of contacts who were more than generous with their composition time and were very generous in rates of printing for me. Because it was always about getting the rules out there. This was never about making money. And in fact, the rules are cost neutral. As long as they don't cost me money, I'm happy to get them out there. It's been tough in recent years with postage costs going up so much, but we always try and subsidise the postage costs and try and keep them at a decent rate. And so the rules are colourful. I don't know if you've seen them, Ken, but they're fully laminated. They're full colour. Yeah. You get a random event deck in there as well. A laminated quick reference sheet. So much value.
It's all there. It's all there.
It's all there.
Did you get documentation then from Jerry and Mike and Mark? What did they provide?
They sent me through. Jerry sent me every single piece of paper that he had that went back to the Holiday Centre Sudan Rules. So I had all this coloured paper come up. It was a big yellow manila folder envelope, I think, if that's what they call it, and turned up with all the sheets, lots of original notes, lots of pieces of paper, quick reference sheets, range charts, everything, and that arrived. And with that, we started playing our first games at the club. So a bit of cut and paste, etc. Play testing it really. How does this flow? How does this work? Etc. Etc. We did that for 5 years. Yeah. Just to make sure we got it right. and then we started to fill in the other information that started to come through. I put a lot of that information, that early information, up on the blog in that 2013. You can probably see it, and then we got the rest. We started filling the rest of the gaps, and as I've just said, some of the gaps still keep on getting filled.
So they'd never been published at all in any
Never been
format.
put, never ever, and that was my aim. My aim was that this was too good a concept not to be played anymore. It was too good a period. The whole idea of the umpire against everybody else in this particular theatre of war, with this array of troops, the diversity of troops, the incredible courage of the Bija, the Hadendow, the Ants, incredible courage of these native troops that inspired Kipling and inspired all these writers. You know, it's an amazing period of British history, but it's an amazing period of history in the Sudan as well. Such bravery on both sides. It's such a perfect wargaming period. So my whole aim was to probably give it a little bit of a resurgence, a little bit of mouth to mouth. And you know what? I think the rules have played a small part in that. I know that Perry's have put out a beautiful Sudan range.
Oh,
Not
amazing! Amazing.
Beautiful Sudan range. They're beautiful figures. You can get Redoubt Sudan figures. Of course, you can get the magnificent connoisseur range, and which is really, in my mind, they're unsurpassed just for its character. They're beautiful figures. There are so many beautiful. Essex had a great Sudan range, so the figures were there, but it was a chance to get the Sudan out there and played again. And you just get online. I get online and I see these games being played all over the world. You know, Jim's going to put one on Historicon in 54mm using Sands of the Sudan. Dave Doherty went to Jerry Elliott's place there, the Situation Room, a few weeks ago, and they played a massive game of the Sudan. It was beautiful to see. I'm sure you saw the pictures. Andy and Richard playing it at Legendary Wargames. These are big games being put on, Sudan games being put on, and every time that's done, it's a bit of a throwback to the nostalgia of the hobby, that romantic nostalgia of the hobby. And I'm a bit biased, but I think they look bloody good.
Certainly
they're
do.
good-looking
They
games.
certainly
They're
do.
good-looking games.
I noticed as well on your blog that you were getting little snippets of information in the comments section, and I'm sure people emailed you stories, as you said. How much help was the wargaming community when it came to dotting the I's and crossing the T's?
You know, in terms of the factual part, the elements of the actual rules, yes, helpful without being massively so. There were little snippets of what we had done and what they had done, etc., in certain situations. But generally, I dotted the I's on that, and that had come through. More importantly, what it did do is it showed the level of interest.
Yeah,
it showed that this was a worthwhile undertaking. That people wanted to see it. That people wanted to play these games. You know what? A lot of people don't even play the games. They just like the idea of a set of rules like this, which is a bit of homage to that period, you know.
Yeah.
And if you have a look, it's quite deliberate. I mean, you look at the photos of the rules, and it's quite deliberately my wargaming collection on some of my homemade tiles. There are gaps and there are things. It's quite deliberately done that way. There's not a lot of photoshopping and stuff like that. This is a wargaming book, a wargaming set of rules, for wargamers. Okay, I've tried to do it the best possible way I can, and I think the production values are very, very high. But you know what? If you just want to get it and look at the pictures, feel free. And so the guys that were contacting us, there was a lot of scenarios. Okay, a lot of memories, and you know what? And not one of them had a bad memory. Not one of them said, you know, he put this game on, but I'd wish we'd played Wagram. You know, they all said, you know, it was such a great game. We had so much fun, you know, and we still talk about it today. And that was the part of what I wanted to do. I really wanted it to be out there in the space again. You know, Peter Gilders Sudan. I wanted it to be out there, and if I was able to do something to assist, I was more than willing to try and do it. It was a great was a great project. I enjoyed it immensely.
One of the big bugbears that I have with a lot of rule sets is that they have very small units, like 12 men and 20, 16 figures, and one of the criticisms of 28 mil wargaming is it looks like a color party taking a flag for a walk. And I really, that's not my style of gaming. But the one thing that these rules do have are, in Yorkshire terms, proper, which means good, big units. Looking across at some of the stuff on your blog about suggested unit sizes, we're not messing about here, are we? We've got
Oh no,
big
no.
stuff.
Oh look, the most of the British forces are a minimum. The battalions, the regiments are 60 figures, made up of 5
Wow.
companies of 12. The
Yeah.
Egyptians can be as much as 72 figures. You've got some camel regiments that are 48 figures. So 48 camel mounted uh, troopers, and then you've got them dismounted as well as their camels at the kneeling position. So the scope is vast. It's yeah, and suddenly out of the blue, 400 or 40, 10 bases of enemy appear over a hill. There's 100 figures about to take them on, and that's just one on one flank. You've got hundreds elsewhere. They're big battalions. They're big battalions, Ken, and they look fantastic.
That's it, don't they? The extra work that goes to making a big unit is more than repaid when you put them on the table. You have the joy of playing the game and maybe playing a game quicker with smaller units. But when you take that extra little bit of time and you put this chunk of stuff on the table, um, my Papal Zouaves for my Italian Wars of Independence were very much like that. There's 48 figures in the unit, and you're doing, number 32, and you think, oh God, I can't do. And then you get it finished, get it based, get it on the table. Looks amazing, and that's one of the big draws, I think, for this period is those big units.
Oh, absolutely, and I mean your collection, those Gringo 40s are, I mean, they're just state of the art
Amazing,
sculpts, aren't they? They're
yeah.
superb figures from Jared, and it's
Mm,
interesting in this colonial period, the Sudan. We were talking about the animation of the elite figures, and you can get 16 or
mm.
17 variants. It's funny, if this period here, you buy one officer, a trumpeter, and then you buy 58 Fusiliers at the ready or whatever. And it
Yeah.
just looks right. you know, it just looks right. These blokes are just ready on the other side of the Zareba, wondering what's about
Mm.
to happen.
We've talked a little bit about it and about the rules being old school, etc. But if you had to explain to somebody how it works in terms of gameplay, what would be your quick pitch on how it works?
So you can imagine something as simple as a column, imperial columns being dispatched from Suakin to relieve a garrison 4 days march inward. Because of reports of activity from Osman Digna or someone like that, one of the local Martis leaders, and so off you go. You're heading off, and your job is to recover the garrison, rescue whoever you have to rescue, and return them to Suakin. And you've got all manner of nasties trying to stop you doing that. So you've got the ability to march out with battalion the Camerons, the Yorks and Lanks, the Naval Brigade, regiment of Lancers, maybe even some Hussars, and
Mhm.
off you go. And if in a good game, you're commanding a regiment, 4 other blokes are commanding the other 4 elements in that particular
Mm.
imperial column. You've all got your own idea of what should happen, and hopefully you can work together long enough to survive the battle. Because the umpire is going to be doing everything he possibly can to divide and conquer. And believe me, if he's worth his weight in gold, he will certainly do that. So anything, if you expect the unexpected, you would enjoy the game.
See, it's kind of a I think they call them collaborative games now in board game terms, where the players are working towards a common objective rather than fighting each other, and the umpire. I think there's a lovely quote in your blog that I wrote down. And you said a good umpire should be hated by all the players before they reach the first oasis.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good. Why is he doing this to us? Why is he doing it to us, Ken? We're just trying to have a good time.
Yeah.
Why did we keep on getting ambushes? So
we're
the
all
basis
supposed to be mates.
exactly right. Last time I go to his place, help him on cut the lawn. It's one of those things where the rules themselves are put out there, and then it allows. The basics are there. I mean, you can play the rules as they are, but then you can take that next step and then add some more depth to it. And people like Dave Doherty have done that, and Andy have done that with adding commanders and different ratings, and like you would have a commander that's in charge of certain characteristics that you can give the regimental colonels. Son of Mars, he gets a +1 when he fights hand to hand, or another chap who was like yourself, a mathematical whiz, and so he commands the guns, and so straight away he's +1 in being able to hit targets because he's very good at plotting the trajectory of his guns. There's a lot of elements that you can add to it, and that's the great thing about any set of rules, is that you can add as much depth and as much fluff to it, and I use that term fluff in a very, very respectful way, to make things even more interesting. And you probably see in the blog that I ran a campaign for quite some time, and I mean the campaign. If ever there was a set of rules and a theatre of war that is just perfect for every Flashman novel, everything, the private school English officers, and the hard bitten war weary sergeants, and their general attitudes towards colonials. It makes it very interesting. There's a lot of scope. It's a lot of fun. It's a harmless, fun game meant to be played in a very convivial spirit, and and at the end of the day, you put your tape measures down, you pick up your snifter of port, and we all toast the Queen.
Fantastic. The one of the mechanisms used in the rules, which we particularly enjoy here, is the use of event cards, and some of those are quite comical to say the least. Just give us a flavour of how the event cards and what they do.
Well, the event cards are interesting. So every turn, the umpire is. And if he's a good umpire, he's making sure that he really drags it out as he draws an event card. And the event cards can be blank; they can have nothing on them, or you can just make something up at the time. They have a number of hostiles appearing, and that's when you determine where they're coming. So the great advantage that the umpire has is that there are no secure flanks in the Sudan. You can be moving along, and all of a sudden there's 1,000 figures, 1,000 fuzzy wuzzies on up your ass, because that's where they can appear. They can appear 360 degrees at any particular time. But other random event cards actually have an event. For example, the sun's been beating quite badly, and one of the regiments randomly veers off in a particular direction. So that could unform any one of the other formations, or even worse, it could open up a square or a formation to attack. Another one is where one of my favourites is that a whole lot of traders have come up, purveyors of fruit and pornographic pictures. They come up, and you've got a choice to make. You can either delay the column and do some trade, or you can beat them off severely. And of course, the problem is, if you do beat them off severely, there's a chance that might cause any friendlies in any village or township that you're going to actually start quickly sewing on coloured patches and quickly yelling, Allah be praised, and going after you. Normally they wouldn't have done that. So every random event card and everything that happens has a consequence on the game. So it's interesting. It's interesting. Suddenly, as a random event, suddenly some natives appear with a krupp gun on the flank, and you think, where the bloody hell did that come from? And suddenly you've got artillery on your flank just when you thought that you'd cleared that a while ago. So it's all about keeping the players on their toes and having a bit of fun. But they're great. The random event cards are fantastic. I purposely kept a few blanks in there so people could write their own random events in there and to suit their own collections and their own players that they play against. And it's a nice touch.
Yeah. I think obviously it's got its similarities to Pony Wars with that sort of generation of the opposing forces and how they act towards other stuff. I was just thinking, just off the top of my head there, I thought it might be a decent system to have for, say, Vietnam or something like that, to have a American column trying to get to a fire base or something like that. I think the idea of it and the mechanism is open to other, other uses, other interpretations.
Ken, you're 100% correct. In fact, it wouldn't be much of a push turning these into an 1879 Zulu Wars, okay, which would be very, very interesting. I actually had correspondence from Adrian Goldsworthy, the author, very, very famous author, and we had some correspondence when the rules first came out, because I always thought this would be absolutely perfect to represent Verus and the Romans in the Teutoburger Wald. Okay, and their march through before the Arminius and the Germans slaughtered them and actually cut them to pieces. And I thought that this would be absolutely perfect for that particular period. So there are a lot of variations on it. It's transferable. The actual game system itself is transferable to so many different areas. And Vietnam absolutely would be perfect. That the unknown enemy that can appear anywhere. But yeah, I mean, I still would like to. I've got a nice collection of To the Strongest based. You've seen what they do. Simon's done with figures based on almost like an impetus base. And I've always thought that would be something I'd like to play through that. So Adrian sent me a whole lot of things that could happen in an ancient column as events, as random events. So I have them all there. So one day I should bite the bullet and get them out there and put them on the blog.
That sounds fantastic. The rules have been out for a while now, and looking through the blog, they kept selling out. So you must have done something all right.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm looking at a box now, which is getting very, very low. Yes, it's been fantastic. It's been really, really good. It was always going to be worthwhile. It was always going to be worth my time because I wanted to play the rules. But the fact that it's been received very, very well, people still buy it. I mean, I just sent a copy out to New Zealand this morning. It's great. Dave Ryan at Caliver Books has been such a supporter. I mean, Dave stocks the books, and Caliver, I mean, you got to go a long way to find a better bookshop for our hobby than Dave. Dave's so supportive of the hobby. He's just a wonderful bloke, and so he's been really, really supportive of the rules, and I can't thank Dave enough. Dave Doherty's Mr. Sudan in the shows over there in the UK. Once again, I mean, I tell you what, Ken, he'd be an interesting bloke to talk to, Dave Doherty. The stories he could tell from his old days. I mean, that would be a very, very interesting podcast because, he goes back to the old Wargames Holiday Centre days with Peter Gilder, etc. Plus what he's doing now, but he's been, once again, that Sudan collection of his is second to none. It's just superb. And what he's done with reinventing various elements of the rules and adjusting them to games and making them fantastic. I mean, the games, you see his games, and Gilder would have been proud. Proud to put
Yeah.
on a
Oh,
game like that.
definitely, definitely. It's I know Dave through the Analog Hobbies Winter Paint
Oh,
Challenge.
yes.
Yeah, so he's always about 3 or 4 years he was just painting nothing but camels, and it was like, how many camels can one man own, Dave? It's just getting to a ridiculous point. But yes, I'd love to have Dave on the show,
Yeah, it's
and
amazing, but
I
it's
will do in the
amazing, Ken.
future.
It's amazing. I mean, and we touched on it before. The fact that these games are back at the holiday centre, I think
Yeah,
there's an absolute. It's just a completion of the circle. The fact that Legendary War Games put it on as well, Andy and
yeah,
Richard put it on as well because they've obviously got fond memories of the games themselves as well, and I understand that people are keen. You see, whenever these games are advertised, I think the spots get snapped
yeah.
up
There's
very
just
quickly.
yeah, they
And,
go,
and there's
they
and there's a
go.
reason for that because we've all, similar to yourself and myself,
Mm,
we grew up seeing those photos and thinking, wouldn't it be fantastic to play in that?
mm.
Wouldn't we have some stories to tell? And you know what? The stories keep on getting told. While we keep on playing these games, we'll never get old, Ken. That's the key.
That's definitely, definitely. So, if somebody wants to get hold of a copy, then Carlo, how would they do that?
Well,
Through Cavalier Books, I guess, in the
uh,
UK.
being a massive supporter of Dave at Caliver Books, he always has books in stock, and
Mm.
I think he's getting ready for another reorder because
Yeah,
I've been buying all these books on Dave on the Never Never on credit. So I've got a feeling there's a big order coming my way, and I deserve it too. So it's good,
yeah,
and from me directly as well. Via the blog, just let me know. Carlo Pagano at bigpond.com, and
yeah.
I'd be more than happy to look after you. But yeah, if you're in Europe and the UK, Dave's your man. He's a bigger supporter you could never ask for.
Well, we're drawing to a close, mate. It's been great having you on. At the end, I always ask my guest if they have a question for me because I've been pounding them with questions for 2 hours. Um, so, have you got anything before we go, mate?
Ken, I absolutely have, and it's interesting because I very much admire what you're doing with the Garibaldi, the unification
Mm,
range that comes out from Gringo 40, because you can imagine with a name like Pagano, and certainly with a name like Carlo, my origins
yeah.
are Italian, and so I grew
Mm,
up with stories of the red shirts and Garibaldi and
no.
all that. My dad would tell these stories, fanciful stories, I'm sure, but when you started researching, you thought this was an incredible man. Garibaldi was an incredible bloke. So
Mm,
there was always an attraction to that period. And so when Gringo 40s brought that range out, I thought, well, that's a no brainer for me. But I've
yeah.
been distracted. What
Mm,
attracted you to that particular period? I know you love the
um,
Italian Wars and the Renaissance, but
yeah.
why this unification period?
It was a bit of an accident, and it actually happened at this very moment on episode 6 of the podcast, because um, I love Italy, and we go on holiday to Italy all the time, and I find the place and the people and the culture just absolutely amazing. And when Fraser VK was on the show, his question was, if there's one unit in history that you haven't painted that you would like to, what is it? And you can't have the Polish winged hussars. That's the one that everybody wants to do. So I, have, with the surname of Riley, I've always been fascinated with Irish history, and I was aware of a unit called the St Patrick's Battalion that fought for the Papal States. In the Wars of Unification. And they have an amazing, I don't know if you've seen it, an amazing full green uniform with yellow piping. And it's one of those uniforms that you just see and you go, oh, I like that. I like that. So the next day, of course, I've spoken about it. So I'm all enthusiastic about it. Found that Gringo 40 made these figures, ordered the unit, and then the next thing I know, I'm reading about Garibaldi and I'm reading about the Papal States during that time because it's kind of the end of the Papal States as a country. I know it's technically a country now, but it's city, whereas before the unification, you still had lands in the Romagna and going out Bologna, all those sorts of areas. So I started reading about Garibaldi, and like you just said, what an amazing guy! How
Incredible.
I'm sure there must have been 4 or 5 of them, because how he didn't die repeatedly is just absolutely amazing.
and the revolutionary fervor out in South America as well, and all the
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah. I've read quite a lot on him, and I'm going through a Jasper Ridley's book at the moment, which is about 700 or 800 pages. And that section when he's in South America, it's like, how did you survive? He's,
Incredible.
he's going off, and he's raiding this, and he's doing that, and then he jumps on a boat, and then he does a bit of pirating, and then he comes back on land and leads an operation on land, and then he goes to Italy, and it's like, how do you still alive at that particular moment in time?
So, what rules
So,
have you used so far for those games?
I haven't as yet. Um, it's what I tend to do is I tend to build a collection, usually to about 500 or 600 figures,
Yeah.
and then get it on the table. And I'm just at that point now where I'm ready to go. I need some French, and I was waiting for the Perrys to bring their Franco-Prussian War French plastic infantry out,
Yeah.
but I got an email from Michael yesterday saying, I'm really sorry, it's not going to be out in time for October, which is when I was planning to do the game. So rules wise, I'm a bit stuck at the moment, but I've now got a little bit of leeway, because I'm not going to be doing this game at a show until February. So I'm going to try Pickett's Charge, the American
Yes,
Civil
yes,
War
from Dave
rules
Brown.
from Dave Brown. They see very popular, and a lot of people like that sort of aide de camp system where
Yeah, it works
you can
brilliantly, Ken. We
yeah,
we do a lot
yeah,
of general to army as the Napoleonic rules of our
yeah,
choice from
mm,
Dave, and once again, Dave supports his rules well. He's very approachable, and
mm,
he's he's got it right. This is a really good rule set, and Pickett's Charge
mm,
is very very similar in terms of the command and controls. But I cut you off. I cut you off because you were
yeah.
about to give me another reason why you got into this period.
Oh, it's gone now.
Oh, well, there we go. Because
There you
it's a
go.
bloody
It's
good
gone.
biscuit as well. Then it's a bloody
Oh
good
yes,
biscuit.
it's come back. It's come back to me. Old age settling in. Um, I've said this a couple of times. I'm in my mid-50s. I've got 30,000 figures. I am getting to the point now, and I have a set of rules, and one of for my own personal wargaming life, and one of those rules is one period, one scale. So if I play a period, I'll only do it in one scale, and I'll go massive in that particular scale. So with those rules in place, I am now at the stage in my life where I'm running out of periods of history to wargame. Uh,
Well, that's a good bloody
so
reason, I tell you.
so having got the enthusiasm and reading about the Garibaldi period, I thought this is a great story to tell, and a great thing to do on the tabletop. So
Right.
so that's where it came from. That's where it
Excellent.
came from.
That's a good answer.
Well, thanks very much, Carlo. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, mate. And hopefully, a few more people will get hold of a copy of your rules, having listened to this, because it's a great method of gaming, that narrative, everyone versus the umpire method of gaming. I really do like that. So it just leaves me to ask you to say good night to everyone.
Thank you very. First of all, Ken, thanks very much for having me on. And like I said, we're all common souls, aren't we? We've all got so much in common with this beautiful hobby. It's all encompassing. It's something that catches you for life. And thanks for listening. And hopefully, it hasn't been too scattered.
No, it definitely hasn't, mate. Thanks very much, everyone. Good night. Well, that was a great chat with Carlo. I hope you enjoyed that. Really enthusiastic guy, loves his hobby, loves his Sands of Sudan, and I encourage you to pick a set of those rules up wherever you are in the world. I think they've got potential for absolutely fantastic games. And as we discussed there, that narrative type of game that you remember for a long period of time after you've played it. Particularly impressed with my idea about using them or something similar for Vietnam. So I might well pick up a set and have a look into that in a little bit more detail, see how that works. Going forward now, after the 6 week, 4 week break I've just had, got a number of guests booked in. In fact, I am booked in now all the way up to Christmas and potentially just waiting to finalise a couple for January and February 2023. And the number of people I've got on my guest list is not going down, even with putting these in. I'm still at 41 people, would you believe, waiting on the guest list. And some of you have been waiting for a long time, and I will get round to everyone. I suppose having an excess of potential guests is much better than having none at all. So I hope you enjoy the people that we bring to you here. Most of them have never been on a podcast before, and 5 of my next 7 guests have not either. So you're going to be hearing fresh names, fresh faces, hopefully interesting conversations about wargaming in its different styles and types, with the emphasis unashamedly on big games and on 28mm. Though those of you will know I've just got a 10mm project on the go at the moment. So thanks again for listening. Thank you for your time. Thank you for Carlo for his time coming on the podcast. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. And I'm going to be speaking to a chap called Mark Hydes. And Mark is a painter and author. And we're going to be chatting about living as a Wargames painter. Not as exciting, I'm sure, as being an international man of mystery, but not far off. So, until next time, Siddhi.